everyone to Circus History Live, another edition.
Am I back? Are you back? Doggone it. Hold it.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to another edition of Circus History Live. This is the June 2021 edition of our get-together. It's called Ringling Ringmasters, and we are very excited to have on the program today Denny McGuire, Jonathan Lee Iverson, and Kevin Bernardos, all of whom were Ringling Ringmasters. And guys, I appreciate you joining us for this opportunity. And but before we get going here, I want to remind folks we are recording this today, so I wanted you to know that. We also will be looking for questions from you. If you have questions, there's a place in your on the side there where you can ask your question by text, and then we'll relay it to Denny, Jonathan, and Kevin. So, folks, it's showtime. Denny McGuire. Denny McGuire, we were talking about before we went on the air. I guess it's kind of age before beauty, right, Denny? Because you are the guy who was there the longest ago. Then we have
I see. I
see have Jonathan, who I believe was there the longest, and then we have Kevin, who also spent many years or several years with the Ringling Circus. But what makes this group really unique, other than the fact that they were all Ringling Ringmasters, is that all of them today continue to be involved in the circus, continue to be involved as ringmasters and leaders in their own right. So we're going to get right to it. Denny McGuire, how did you get involved with this game?
Anybody that remembers Alice Lynn knows how I got involved. She joined the show as a dancer the year before I joined. Irvin heard her singing in winter quarters. They were going out on the rodeo route, which is the second year of the tour. And he said, the show's already set, but I would love for you to sing with the Ringmaster next year. So Alice and I have known each other since high school. So she thought, well, if I get Denny to audition, whoever gets the job, at least they'll be that good. So I did. I called and called and called. Apparently they had decided who they wanted. That's what I've heard. But I kept calling. And Jeff Losef finally, I think, set up an audition for me just to get me to quit calling him.
So had you sung professionally before that, Denny?
Yeah, I was working in theater at the time. And I was the MC and vaudeville conceiver and director. And yeah, at a melodrama and vaudeville theater. So yeah, I'd sung professionally before.
So, you know, Jonathan, I know you had quite a career as a singer before you were hired on, but tell us, how did you get involved with The Greatest Show on Earth?
It was all a beautiful, happy accident. Like you were saying, I was well on my way to really making my bid to have an opera career. I graduated the Hart School of Music at the University of Hartford Hart School of Music, and graduated there. I didn't want to go to grad school. I met a fantastic teacher. He and I gelled, and the plan was to move to Europe and continue my studies there, but I had to raise some money. So I went out, auditioned for everything. I did all sorts of things, all legal. I did some modeling here, nothing that I really would ruin my chances from becoming senator or something. But then again, the bar is so low now, who knows? Then I went off and I auditioned for a dinner theater, the Fireside Dinner Theater, which is out in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. The auditions were held in New York. I happened into the company of the wonderful Philip William McKinley, who was directing. And unbeknownst to me, he was also directing Ringling Brothers. And so I was fortunate enough to be cast in the dinner theater. And I received this interesting call the evening of my audition that they wanted to cast me, but hey, would you be interested in auditioning for Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey as their ringmaster? I thought it was a prank. It sounded like the CIA. I'm paranoid. And they really were like, no, for real, we want you to audition. And they emphasized, we want a singing ringmaster. And so I said, well, whatever. I mean, I'm looking for a gig. And, obviously the rest is history. It wasn't the easiest audition in the world. And there were a lot of wonderful candidates, over 30, I think I was up against. I was informed of that. But, back then we recorded for the producer, Kenneth Fell. And then I had the honor of auditioning in person for the late, great Tim Holst. Who flew into Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. He came in. He looked like the fixer in the mafia, the guy with the shades. He looked like he just came in. I was like, man, he must be very important. I think he had a big old ring or everything, but his voice, and he just was very unassuming, and it was great. I auditioned for him, and then he offered me a contract, and the rest was history.
Rest is definitely history, because you were there at the final performance of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey in Uniondale, New York. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Kevin, you're another person who was basically doing work on the stage before you got called to the circus, right?
I didn't have a lot of credits to my name. I graduated with a degree in musical theater, and I love Broadway. I grew up in New Jersey. So my mom took me to see the Broadway shows, and eventually I went without her. And I really loved singing and telling stories. And so the Ringling audition was just one of however many auditions I get my hands on. Most of them culminated in no work. I was doing anything at that time in 2000 to get paid to sing and dance. I sang High Holy services in Brooklyn, and I'm not even Jewish. Literally, it was just whatever I could find that was open and available. It was Backstage magazine come out every week, and you take your highlighter and you circle the ads and send 8x11 photo and a resume stapled or taped to the back, and you hope to God that it actually arrives at someone's desk. And so Ringling is one more audition like that. But I happened to be in a room in a studio, Ripley Greer studio in New York, and it was who in the room? Tim Holst was there, David Killinger, musical director, Phil McKinley was there, and Phil's an amazing figure, and I definitely credit Phil absolutely with having that opportunity. I was replacing an incredible singer and Broadway performer named Mike Cowan, who only did 1 year on the 130th, and then so I was coming in to replace him. I probably got hired because I semi-fit the costume that he had on, and I could do the thing that he was doing already for sure, probably more the costume. But it was an incredible departure from anything I ever imagined I'd be doing. It was a total left turn, but it turned into a whole odyssey and a life's calling, as you could say. Yes.
And that's one of
I cherish those times.
It's one of the things that I find really fascinating about the three of you is, so many, especially back in the day, so many of the circus families and the troops were born into the circus. The three of you gentlemen, all three of you came from outside, but it's become so much a part of your life that now, decades later, you continue to embrace the circus. And I think that's fantastic. And I want to talk to you a little bit, Jonathan, about the fact that, you were touring in the train with your family too. I mean, that must have been quite an experience.
Oh, that was the greatest experience. I often said that I had the greatest gig in show business. If you think about it, my quip was, I get to make a living while having a life, and doing what I love with the people I love most. So it really was the greatest gig in show business, and I think it really, more than anything, it enriched my children in a very dynamic way that we're still. I'm looking forward to the fruits of that even more so now. I see it in them and how they relate to people, how fluid they are in just being around a diversity of people, in how they have a sense of themselves, their own identity, and they don't compromise that, but they also aren't judgmental. They're very open-minded. They're very inquisitive. And it's really beautiful to see. And I know it had a lot to do with the opportunity that was afforded us in the circus world via Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Daly to travel the country with our family.
And just a follow up for you, today people will be watching this later, but today is June the 19th. It's the first Juneteenth federal holiday in the United States, June 19th, 2021. And Jonathan, you were the first African-American ringmaster. So you obviously were breaking some ground there also.
That was such a wondrous thing. It was a whirlwind for me for like the first 6 months of the tour, because I wanted so bad to believe in a post-racial dream when I first started, because I just didn't want people bugging me as I thought back then. And the wonderful Barbara Flukehout, who she was likely all of our mentors, taught me everything about media. The woman's a whiz. And she taught, she said, I'm your Brooklyn Jewish mother. And I'm going to tell you, you want to embrace this thing, it's going to hold you in good stead. And she was right. I learned something that actually I learned from Kevin Bernardos. He said it in an interview. I interviewed him some years later for Huffington Post, and he said something that I still carry with me today. He said, we don't have the right to take the experience away from our audience. However we may feel about it, and I thought, man, that's such a powerful thing, because we belong to them, and how they see us, they have that right. I mean, it's their time, money, and imagination. And it wasn't really until my grandfather and my grandmother visited the show in Chicago, Illinois at the United Center that it really hit me that, oh, okay, I really need to embrace this thing. My grandfather was an activist. He escaped the lynching because he was trying to unionize. And I never forget the conversation we had after the show in Chicago. I mean, to see your grandparents turn into 6-year-olds, and mind you, my granddad was actually that whole side of my family are a bunch of singers. I have cousins who will blow you away. My granddad was a great singer, I was told, a great gospel singer. And he would always tell me, I'm living through you, Johnny boy. And so he said to me, after, going on and on about the show, he stops for a while and he goes, there was a time I couldn't sit anywhere I wanted to. And here I am, I sit where I want, and there's my boy. And that, I said, okay. I said, all right, so this is what this is. And that's, to me, that's the gift. And, no matter how I felt about it, I really learned to embrace it even more, especially learning more about the wonderful Black Ringling personalities that came before me, the King Charles Troupe, so many others who I know probably had a harder go than me. To be quite frank with you, my time at Ringling Brothers, I often say I was treated like pre-murder trial OJ. Like nobody wanted to bother me. I was like the guy for some reason. And my general manager, the great Mark Gaibo, told me, so he said, listen, Kenneth called me, he said, you keep him happy. So it was a wonderful time for me for the most part.
That's a great story. Thanks, Jonathan, for sharing that. Denny, when you talk about that image of the Ringmaster, you look like him today. I know you've got a show coming up, which we're going to ask you about, but with the mustache and, the way you dress and carry yourself, you all do that. But help me a little bit about when you went to Japan with the Ringling Circus, because that was something that was a little bit different, taking the show overseas and this image that you're now projecting.
It was really different because we had to. Kenneth asked me if I wanted a translator to translate everything I said, and that's going to make the show too cumbersome. And he said, "Well, I said, either I learn it in Japanese or just leave me home. You're wasting your money on me if I just go as an English speaker to sing the songs." So he agreed, and I went to a Berlitz, literally Berlitz, to learn the announcements or to learn how to pronounce and transliterate the announcements. Although we didn't have announcements yet, but I learned to pronounce this, that, and the other thing. Gorong kudasai. People came up to me and went, oh, didn't he? That means watch him. I said, yeah, that's it. That's my favorite announcement. Watch him. And so they knew that was, yeah. Anyhow, so working with the translator was really interesting because the syntax of Japanese is noun, predicate, verb is at the end. So in Ringmaster, you go, and now this is going to happen there, way up there, and it's going to be done by those guys. Well, in Japanese, it's exactly like that, except those guys verb. So we had to find a way to get by that, and we did by adding something in lieu of the name of the act. We would say the Flying Trapeze Artist, verb, and then just all on its own say the name of the act. And I said, and then we get to May All Your Days Be Circus Days. And Ken said, well, we wouldn't really say that in Japanese. I said, we don't say that in English. We're not translating English. We're translating circus into Japanese. So we got there and I spent a good deal of time with my flashcards learning that it's like what Jonathan knows is when you're studying opera and classical choral music, you have to learn to perform in foreign languages. You don't have to speak the foreign language. You have to know what you're saying and what the words mean, and you have to perform in those languages. Well, so that's, I use that for the announcements. The most incredible thing is I went to Disneyland the year they opened It's a Small World, and it was an e-ticket. For those of you not old enough to remember, that was the most premium ride coupon. And I was so bummed. Bunch of dolls singing this boring song. Oh my Lord. So then I get the music in the mail of all the songs I'm going to be singing in Japan. And one of them is, oh my God, It's a Small World. Oh God, really? And then I'd sing a verse and then sing it in Japanese. So I learned in Japanese. Opening night in Sapporo. They're eating it up. They're loving it. And then I get to the closing song of opening, and it's Small World. And I look out at all these children. Mind you, these are the grandchildren of men that were shooting at my father and that my father was shooting at in World War II. So there's all of that import. And all of these kids started singing along with me. I was tearing up. I had trouble getting through the song. It was just the most wonderful moment, perhaps, of my career. It was just unbelievable, because I, up until that moment, had hated the song, and now I'm madly in love with it.
Fantastic. Kevin, I've seen your performance as a singer, as a dancer. I mean, you could probably be in any Broadway show and people would, really enjoy it. And now they get to enjoy your circus. But what was it like for you when you put on that top hat and started singing those songs and announcing those acts?
Well, it was a totally different world than I ever imagined that I would get a chance to be a part of. I wasn't acting. These guys know you're not, it's a heightened world and it's full of very vivid characters, but you're yourself. And that part, I think was it's definitely seminal in that discovery And one of the things I think I feel so strongly about just in life in general is about being yourself, being your authentic self, and not having the fear that you might feel keep you from doing the thing that you love to do or that you believe in. And the circus, it doesn't always allow for that so easily. I worked in jobs, and you work for companies, and they want you to do things a certain way, and you're serving them. So you're sort of changing your hopefully. I mean, if the producer's done a good job, they've brought things that they believe into the show, and that's complementing or supporting their vision of how they want to connect with people. Or they're just asleep at the wheel and they put anyone in there. I suppose there's plenty of times when that's happened too. But with time, and I worked with a bunch of different people, and eventually that voice that kept telling me to do that caused me to see that I would very soon, or at some point, run out of places where I could do the thing I wanted to do, especially because I had a certain idea about how I wanted to do it. And so I started, it started very small actually, but you take one action and it starts to create a kind of snowball effect. There's an echo and it bounces back. And I also have a willfulness in me. If some circumstance or some person tries to imply that it can't be done or that I can't do it, I've learned more effective the choice instead of trying to face that adversary head on. Just keep going and go around them, and you can get there. I think that the satisfaction that comes from building a dream the way that you want it to be is it's hard won, but it's one of the most wonderful things. And I wish that the circus that I now get to be a part of, which is absolutely indelibly held up, supported 100% by all of the incredible people in the community that I have worked with, and that now extends beyond the circus into businesses and communities. And in those communities, that web of that's how you build a dream, because you in following that thing and helping others, and that's definitely a key concept here in being successful. The more that you can identify ways to help others with what you do, the more opportunities that you end up having. And because less and less as time went on to employers to give me that opportunity, instead to just go out and start trying to say, hey, I want to will this help you, or can I find a way to do this with you? And so together now, I can't really be fired except by the people. And the only thing that keeps me from doing something I really, really believe in, that I love, that I want to do, is how bad I want it, how long I'm willing to hold on to make it happen. And I think that doing that, struggling in front of everyone, falling and failing and striving and getting up again, it has an impact, even on the people that would not like to call you their friends, or vice versa, that they see that someone is out there doing it, and so that they can do it too. And so I wish that joy and success for my friends as well as my non-friends, I suppose, because I think that I leave more light than I take away in my life.
Well, and as I said earlier, and I'll just kind of make a little bit of a pitch now, all three of these gentlemen now are involved with the circus. Kevin's got his own circus, the Venardo's Circus, which is fantastic. And if you get a chance to see it, I know I live in Phoenix, Arizona. He is today in Napa, I think. I hope you get down here before too long, because I would like to see the show. Jonathan.
Springtime, baby.
Yeah, Jonathan with his new show, Omnium, which he's going to tell us about. Denny is up in just outside of Baraboo right now with Bello Knock. I'm going to go to you, Jonathan, because I have something sort of that both Denny and Kevin talked about a little bit, is sort of this role that you play. And I mean, you were with the Ringling Circus for a long time. You obviously matured and you started your family. We talked about that earlier, but you also played a role in leadership on the show, right? I mean, people look to the Ringmaster as someone, even outside of the performance, who, you're a leader among the cast, I think.
I think that's absolutely true, and Denny and Kevin can definitely attest to that. because of how the circus community is uniquely structured, it's not like a theater tour. It's not like a rock and roll tour where people basically saunter off into their hotel rooms and do whatever. You're literally moving, living, barbecuing, fighting, playing, making love, breaking up, having you're literally in this community, and it's like this unspoken reality with regards to the ringmaster. I mean, everybody knows he might not be the owner of the show. He might not even have a legitimate managerial position in the show, but there's something about the guy who, or the woman who is the voice of the show, who, despite how otherworldly talented his colleagues may be, nothing happens until you say so. And I think it's the greatest compliment when you hear your colleagues. It was one of the things I cherished the most when, artists like an Alexander Lacey or a great Mark Oliver Gable or whoever would come up to me and tell me, man, I really felt like I had to really step it up because you made such a big deal of me in that announcement. I had to. And that's the job. You share the enthusiasm you want to share with the audience. And I think the ringmaster, it's a really humbling gig because I always look at it as you're a glorified fan who gets paid to dress well and run his mouth about people are going to do extraordinary things, who are going to come through. And so that I guess that position also translates behind the curtain. I was always cognizant of how I behaved, how I was with my family.
Yep.
Listen, I'll be honest, my first 2 years at Ringling Brothers, let's just say there's a certain gentleman by the name of Larry Carton who I can't run for office until he's dead. So we ran crazy my first 2 years. We're tight as Den of Thieves. He's a wonderful guy, and we had a lot of fun. I was young, and I did what young people do with new money and a wonderful gig, and who can walk up to a young lady and go, I'm a ringmaster, baby. That's what you did. But, as you mature, and one of the things I always loved about the circus is, in a sense, you're permitted to be who you are. You're permitted to be who you are, so as long as you don't betray the show. Nobody cared if I was out all night, whatever. And there were times my first couple of years, man, I was pulling all-nighters, being crazy, but as long as you don't betray the show. And I understood that position. And I think as a result, my colleagues responded to that. They watched me grow. They watched me go from being a bachelor to being a husband, to eventually being a father, and seeing, how I would behave. And I knew that, and I especially knew it when the unfortunate would occur. Namely the terrible accident we had back, I think it was 2014, with the hair hang act. I mean, that was, I hate to say it, that's when I made my bones. Jim Rigoni used to look at me he said, "You're so lucky. You haven't had that thing happen." And I had a couple of accidents, the motorcycles, whatever, or an animal would decide, I'm not doing that. Or, there would be a technical glitch and I was always good at covering that. But this now was real time. I didn't know if these ladies were alive or dead. And I had to make sure I didn't crack. And emotionally inside, I was a mess. But for some odd reason, I think all that experience, I had enough experience to gather myself and get through that. And I had the wonderful help of my wife, who led the production staff at the time. But I think those examples are really what endear you to your colleagues. And I understood I had to be the rock. And you have to sometimes, you have to be many things. I used to leave my dressing room door open. I was kind of like the de facto counselor. People would come to me, with all sorts of things, you know. So
And I'm sure that was especially the case that final season. I want to talk about that. Denny, I'm hearing voices. Are you?
That was the intercom. They just called half hour.
Okay, so we're about halfway through this show too. So I wanted to just kind of remind everybody, you're watching Circus History Live from the Circus Historical Society, which we do this every month. We get together and talk about the thing that we all have a passion for, circus history. But I also encourage you to go to our website, circushistory.org. It's an opportunity to kind of get your daily fix of circus history, and also join our organization, Circus Historical Society. And we have, among other things, a quarterly publication called Bandwagon, which some of you may have seen, and the next issue is going to be coming out very soon. So circushistory.org, it's a chance to continue living circus history every day of the year, 365 days. Denny, where did you make your bones in the arena?
In the arena, off the floor, I just always had considered myself the morale officer. On the floor, I, in all of this time, knocking on Formica wood, never had a really serious accident to navigate. But there were things going wrong, you know. For 1 year, they decided, Lord knows why, that it would be a good idea to have the ringmaster narrate the clown car. Okay, so I'm narrating the clown car, and all of a sudden, across the ring, there's the assistant performance director going,
Stretch it.
stretch. They're all out of the car already, except one. Tommy Parrish is opening the door for each one. He doesn't see him behind him. So I bootleg the mic and say, Tommy, don't open the door. Don't open the door. Well, okay. So and next out is, I think it was historic characters. I don't remember. And he wouldn't come out. Meanwhile, the guy inside banging on the door trying to get out, and Tommy won't let him out. And so I tried to coax him out, and he's trying to come out, and Tommy won't let him out. So finally I said, young man, if you don't come out of that car right now, I'm coming in for you. And sure enough, Tommy opens the door. He starts out. I put my hand right in his face, shoved him back in, got in, and then spent the next 3 minutes talking to him. Well, what's the matter? It's opening night here in Louisville. These people have all come. They love you. You don't have to worry about it. Don't be just on and on and on. What happened was, when I was outside before I got in the car, the assistant performance director points, and I look out, because the next act is mixed animals in all 3 rings. And the zebras were 7 ways to the wind. Jonathan is shaking his head. He knows zebras. They were all over the place. So finally, they go, okay, they're ready. I said, now are you ready to come out? Good boy. All right, let's get in. And you watch. When we get out of this car, the audience is going to go crazy for you. They love you. They'll clap and cheer. And sure enough, I got out, he got out, and the audience went wild.
Surprised you didn't do it every night.
No. Well, clowns came up to me afterward and said, wow, aren't you pissed off? About what? That opportunity? Just, well, and then they mentioned somebody else that would have been really tearing the place down with how angry he was. But I loved it. That was my longest keep the show going.
That's a good one. Kevin, is there a memory that you have about when you suddenly knew, yep, I'm the ringmaster?
That's a happy story there. Soon.
It'll happen soon.
Well, my mind, I'm sure there've been lots of times when The one that I think of immediately was, well, it was standing outside the train in costume, waiting for a PR pickup. And it was 7 something, maybe 8 o'clock, a little after 8 o'clock in the morning. And then I heard someone peek their head out the train and say, look at the TV. And the planes had hit the World Trade Center.
Oh, wow.
And that was the moment that I found out about that. And everyone was alive at that time, as a series of experiences associated with it. I was just standing next to the world's longest privately owned railroad in a sparkly costume when this horrible thing was happening in where I'm from in New York. My girlfriend at the time was actually standing on top of our apartment in Queens and looking at the sky and the skyline, describing it to me on the phone. And in the days that followed, I believe we didn't open. We delayed a day. We were in Memphis at that pyramid. But when we did start again, and there was a lot of talk and, back chatter from the Felds and all emails and what the show was going to do, and, planes are grounded. But when we did open on Thursday, a day later, and no one, as the Circus cast was concerned, had any second thought about going out there and doing the thing that they do. I guess what I didn't realize is how people who were scared, people who were affected by the orange alerts, and it was a very scary time, and people were reacting with fear to things. To be in that place where there was this joy machine factory that just needed to go out there and keep making the donuts. There's nothing make the donuts about the extraordinary talents and accomplishment that is a circus working, but this thing, it became something that was so important, or that I found myself in this place where we were actually part of doing something that was positive, something that was bringing people together and taking them away from something that, all those feelings. And that definitely was an incredibly empowering experience for me to be there in the ring and to think that someone has to be the ringmaster. There may be a million reasons why I got it that have nothing to do with being talented. It's just who gets up there onto that pedestal and opens their mouth and says, this is the greatest thing you'll ever see. And I think that if you apply that notion that, first of all, gratitude for just the opportunity to follow your dream that other people don't have, gratitude, nurturing gratitude, and then getting out there and knowing that you can make a difference if you quit doubting that voice in you and instead feed the wolf that wants to make something good happen in the world. So I'm really grateful for the circus for that time for so many reasons, but I know that the circus has been something that has continued to bring people together through some of the most difficult moments of the history of certainly this country and many other times. I'm so glad now that this friggin' pandemic seems to be coming to an end. So we're going to start getting around each other once more and to remind people that your neighbors and your community is right next to you, and it just as worth believing in and getting out to see as they ever were, and get over this time. It's time.
I think you are right. And so with that in mind, let's talk about what everybody's doing now. And I'm going to start with Denny because I know you're going to be going on stage in just a few minutes. Where are you? What's happening? And when can we see it?
I'm in the Wisconsin Dells, which is, as you mentioned, minutes. In fact, I had to run home and get my charger in the Dells and it was 9 minutes. And I was in Baraboo. I had a wagon wheel table, glass top table that I donated to the Al Ringling Museum that's on display in their brew pub now. And my wife and I had a great time. And I posted a couple pictures on what is the Facebook thing. And I got a call from Bello. grew up in the Dells. His wife was born in the Dells.
The Tommy
And-
Bartlett Show.
The Tommy Bartlett Show, exactly. And Tommy has closed his show. So Bella was up here and they shopped around and found a theater and had just closed the deal a couple of days before. And he said, man, you're there now. You want to stay? I said, well, I don't want to stay, but I'll come back. So it's basically the show for you New Yorkers that we did in New York at the New Victory Theater about 5 years ago. Bellomania, I think is what it was called. Now it's just Bello in the Dells or something like that. And I just get to go on stage with Bello, and we have a rapport that's just, our timing is really fun. Really, really fun. And I'm old, I'm semi-retired. And this show has taken the semi out of semi-retired. We're here for 3 months. I don't like being away from my wife at all. But she said, yeah, but it's Bello. You gotta go. So I went, and here I am. So we're doing this show here at the fabulous Palace Theater in the Dells.
So I know a number of people on this call will make their way to Baraboo this summer now that Circus World is open again. And
yes,
a lot of us look forward to seeing you. Jonathan, I know you've got, there are going to be some announcements pretty soon, but tell us what you can about Omnium.
OmniumCircus.org. OmniumCircus.org is the really wonderful brainchild of the wonderful Lisa B. Lewis. She called me up.
Really?
I'm starting the show. I'm starting the circus. I'm like in the middle of a pandemic. And she said, yes, if not now, then when? And I thought it was a wonderful idea. I mean, it's really broadening the tent. Where, you know, it's not just the multicultural phenomenon circus has always been, but it's also multi-abled body. And it's really giving access to that community, the so-called disabled community. I have a problem with the word now, considering the artists we've been able to display thus far. Right now, we have virtual presentations that have been a big hit, surprisingly and wonderfully, much like Kevin's show, because we just had to, right? We do have, we recently signed contracts for live shows. They're going to be in major markets. That's to be announced very soon. So we are right now in the midst of putting together a really spectacular show for you. And I can tell you, we have a lot of wonderful, creative, dynamic minds who are hard at work. Noé España, Mark Lonergan, to be, it's really wonderful. Pete Buffano, you know, so we're really putting together something wonderful, something special that I think audiences really will eat up. Of course, we're a nonprofit, so and if you're feeling charitable, and if you have deep-pocketed friends, we'd like to know them, who love the circus, remember omniumcircus.org. I'm honored to be the ringmaster there, and also for some strange and odd reason, Lisa believes that I'm qualified enough to be the chairman of the board of Omnium. I just love saying that only because they call Sinatra chairman of the board, but it's actually a function. So
great.
It's great. And we're having a great time doing it. It's new for me because I'm on the other side of the table. So, you know, I'm just used to being dolled up and pushed out there to do what I do. Now to actually, you know, I have more, if you're hearing this, Kenneth, I have more respect for you now. I really do. I empathize, and all those things I complained about, please forgive me.
And I know, Kevin, I mean, you have been doing this now for a couple of years. Venardo's Circus is real, and it's a very, you know, you've been coast to coast with this thing. Tell us a little bit about how you moved from, you know, just holding the microphone to also signing the checks.
I worked for Ringling, and then I worked for Big Apple, and then I worked with Vargas out in California. And there was a lot of in-between years with a lot of struggle and a lot of struggle, a lot of ups and downs. But eventually, as I was finishing in Vargas, I just thought of, how am I going to move forward with this? I made a little pitch reel, which ended up being, it's a little piece of music and a little choreographed number in a rented tent in California. And I used that to pitch basically corporate circus. But I kept getting people to tell me no, or I wasn't looking in the right places, or whatever it was. I kept hammering at it, and I figured that, well, if these people don't want it, I'm sure someone wants it, because I think it's a really cool idea and I love it. And if I just try and find a way to do it more, I'm going to find a way to keep growing. So this tent behind me is actually the way that it started at a fair, with a tiny tent, and the performers were inside of it. And we've actually upgraded in this photo. I don't know if you can see, there's a stage in front of it a little bit there, aluminum stage, but we were just on the ground in Pomona, California, and there's a bunch of parking rails that they'd lined up in front, and people were just standing for a 30-minute show, 5 times a day, and about 120 degrees in the shade. That's the LA County Fair experience. But that was my first one of those, and I sold it to them. And basically, I added some fairs the next year, and the following year, I started to try and sell tickets. And I did not know what I was doing, and I fell on my ass. And thank goodness I had the fairs that kind of formed a framework of guaranteed income, so that if I did well or poorly with the ticketing, trying to do it in a measured way, but it was still, no sane person would try and do all of these things. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I'm so glad that I kept following it, because by 2019, one of those fairs in San Bernardino the year before had allowed me to finance a tent, a real tent that fits about 350 people inside. And so I started putting that tent up and trying to do shows. And the first big success was at St. Augustine, where they have a well-developed tourism and arts council there. They give us a little boost, a grant, if you will, that we had to spend toward marketing. But it was the first time that we really put some effort in that department. We've been making the show. I mean, you can have an amazing piece of art that's a show, and if it doesn't get in front of people to change their breath, make them smile, it doesn't really do much in the universe. So I knew from an early time that we need to find a way to get the idea in front of people, and so that came from fairs, and then also working with St. Augustine, where we put the show at a certain time of year, and we spent the money on targeting people who were more than 50 miles away from the city. This helped St. Augustine to generate hotel stays and restaurants and other attractions. People spend money doing that stuff. So once we did that a couple of times, and St. Augustine saw, hey, this is really actually good for the city, and it brings a lot of money in to help the economy. Well, we started duplicating that in other places. And then when we were doing well, we were able to convince a mom and pop bar and grill that, hey, we're not just some Yahoo circus. Let us set up on your property and let's make a deal and work together and promote the thing. So we stitched together it went from zero to hero. We did St. Augustine one year in December, and then the next year in July, we did Tacoma. And the same sort of, it was just exponential. And for all those people that are out there that have some idea that they want to accomplish, I am no smarter than you are. I really am not. And I think that if you passionately pursue the thing, this is not just the dream speak, but get out there and try. Don't worry, be crappy. I strive to make something that is excellent, but I know that there's no way that I'm going to succeed, first of all, without a team, a group of people. And that team is not just the people I work with directly, but the community that we end up serving. And the more that I just get out there and try, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And there's so much room in this gigantic country. So many people that want a little bit of joy, that want to be inspired. And you got to go, brother. I understand.
Gotta go.
So can you give us 2 more minutes?
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna do lightning round here. If there's any show that you could go back and Denny, if there's any show you could go back to, what would it be? Why? And tell us about the acts.
Holy smokes.
I know, I didn't tell you ahead of time.
Tell you about the acts. My first year, I was lucky enough to be the guy that introduced the first quadruple somersault. There was also a double-double, two double layouts, a 3.5, two triples. It was phenomenal.
Vasquez.
One day, all the men in both acts missed a trick. And they were, so I went and give them a bit of a crock myself after the act. And they decided, here's what's up. Tonight, anybody that misses a trick has to buy the beer for the rest of us. And Miguel Vasquez says, well, okay, but that doesn't count the quad. And Scott Osgood said, if it counts, if my double-double counts, for me, that's the quad. He says, okay. So they do the whole act. They're perfect. Miguel Vasquez looks down at me as he's standing on the platform and goes, and licks his lips. He's ready for me to buy beer. Through the quad. And at this point, he was making it once every week and a half or so. It was such a thrill. I went into their dressing room, brought the beer. I said, and here's the deal, guys. From now on, whenever both acts are perfect, I'll buy the beer. Well, those mothers started getting perfect acts 3-4 times a week, just so I'd have to buy the beer. And I feel that I can take a little credit for all those quads. I gotta go, guys.
All right, thanks, Denny, and we'll come
Hi,
see
Denny.
you at the Palace
Who said
Theater
hi?
there in the Wisconsin Dells later this summer. So, Jonathan, same question.
Denny.
You could go back and once again, kind of relive one of those performances. What would it be and why?
One of the performances, Jesus Christ.
One of those shows.
Okay, that's easier. Oh, the Living Carousel. My first
Show that was.
Oh, it was glorious. I wish I was the performer I was when I did Dragons for the Living Carousel. I was much more mature. I knew my voice better. I was stronger. I was good in Living Carousel, but again,
Can anybody hear me? How do I turn this thing off?
We'll mute you there, Denny.
I was that young. I was that young and crazy guy, in my first year, and I was a young and crazy guy in my first year, and I remember missing. I missed the first part of our tri-state area run because my voice completely blew out. From reflux, from allergies. I mean, the circus, so it just was for me, it was, it really was a singer's nightmare. But I wasn't living right either. But I learned, I came back, I opened up in New York City, Madison Square Garden, which is always magical. But that show itself was just such a dream. I just wish those songs were so amazing. Everything about that show just clicked. I honestly just wish I was just more mature to really appreciate what it was, because everything was there. I mean, the costumes, the hats, the whole bit. I have this beautiful hat here. I hope you can see it. It's similar to the one I wore during the spectacle number. This was made for me by the one and only Gina Cristiani from Gina's Designs. She made this recently, and I had a hat similar to that for the Living Carousel, but definitely Living Carousel. Loved it.
So, Kevin, not only Ringling, but also Big Apple. Tell me a little bit about what was your sort of seminal moment when it came to being a ringmaster, other than your own show.
Well, the ringmaster part now, that's the easiest part of the day. The seminal moment is I've definitely stepped in elephant poop in front of a big crowd. Thing is, at Ringling, you can get away with all kinds of errors and flubs in your own personal space, because much of that doesn't translate to the people that are 50 feet, 100 feet away. For sure, you can mess up an announcement. I guess I've done that plenty of times. But really, one of the most difficult moments was getting on to Big Apple and discovering that I really didn't know how to talk with an audience yet. I got the job and I got hired based on a singing audition. And then the creatives on the show at that time did not think that the singing was something that they wanted to have in the show. So I found myself, it's like a fish on a bicycle, or at least I felt that way, because I had not yet learned. At his Big Apple, I was standing right next to people. I mean, you're on the ring and there's people right there. And it forced me to grow. It forced me to deal with some fears and this whole part of me that to just be with an audience. And as painful as that time was, and it was a 2-year contract, so it was painful for an extended period of time, I think it was definitely punctuated by amazing, wonderful experiences and a whole lot of it. The artists and my dear friend Rob Torres, who I got to know through Big Apple Circus, I love that guy. I miss him so much. But I'm so glad for some of the most difficult moments, because you start to realize that you just have nothing to lose by not just getting out there and trying to do it. And because if it's something you really want to do, even if you're not that great at it at first, I suppose there are certain things that I'll never try. I'm probably not going to be the flying trapeze artist who does the quad. For example, I have a skill set that lends itself in another direction. I think that a dose of reality you need to embrace there. But a big part of it is like, how are you being helpful? Can you be helpful with what your talents are? And when you see that there's like a response from what you're putting out, and you're doing something that you're meant to do and that you love to do, you're going to feel that response. And hopefully you discover that that's enough to keep the wheel moving and to get better at something, to acknowledge when you don't know what you're doing and seek help from people who do know better, and stay open to learn. So that's one of the things I'm grateful for from Big Apple, for sure.
That's fantastic. And, you know, as we close here, Jonathan, you and I have talked in the past about that final season of the show, and those train rides, that last train ride. Take us back to that last year and what it was like, and that final performance of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey.
To be quite frank with you, I was numb, because I could feel at least a year out, a year and a half out, and everybody was talking. You know, people talk a lot in the circus industry, and even if it's not real, which most of the time it's not. But you could feel the end was near. I mean, you didn't have to be a business mind to see that the numbers weren't adding up, that despite the great effort, and it was a great effort, at least from the production end of the company, that it just didn't match up with ticket sales. You know, it's plain and simple. However, there was something really fascinating about the fact that when we made that announcement, we were going to close, all of a sudden it was like America woke up, and suddenly we became Hamilton. And it, like, every show was sold out. People were calling, trying to, you know, finally we have scalpers. You know, it was amazing, you know, and that really signaled to me. And of course, the release of The Greatest Showman, the film, because we know films are magic. I think coupled with those, that told me, okay, this will be brief. So I wasn't in that state of, oh, this is terrible. I mean, it stunk, because I fully intended my whole dream was that I would die on that show. You know, I mean, because I mean, what else is there to do as far as being a performer? Truly, when your co-workers have been 4-ton elephants, and your human co-workers can fly and do daring things. I mean, what else is there really to do? And you're doing that with your family. I mean, everything's there. And so I think I was sad about that ending. I think it was more about, you know, this great piece of Americana was now leaving me rather than me leaving it. I mean, we as performers, you're always, you know, transient, you know, but you didn't think the institution itself would go away, but we felt it coming along. So I think I was already mentally prepared, and I had been toughened enough through the years, having to cover so many things, that mishaps and misfortunes that I was able to callous my mind, as David Goggins would say, to lead. You know, I didn't want to be the blubbering, emotional, you know, guy. It was about, okay, well, where do I take my family next? And the show must go on. That's what it was, and that's what it was about for me. And I just accepted it for the history that it was. Hey, listen, I have the privilege of having done this. And I have the privilege of being the last voice in the 146-year history of this major institution. And that's how I dealt with it. But I was more concerned with certain fans because I knew how much it meant to much of our audience. I mean, there were so many people who had just such a deep, emotional, even spiritual connection with Ringling Brothers. That's who I was mainly concerned with.
You know, but as you said, the show goes on. We have Venardo's Circus. We have Omnium. We have Denny, who said he should be retired at this point, I think is what I was getting. And he's still out there calling a show right now. So, you know, I think that the show does go on. You are all three tremendous examples, role models, as you've always been for the circus, and you continue to be. I want to thank you for joining us for the June 2021 edition of Circus History Live. This program will be available on YouTube and also at circushistory.org, the Circus Historical Society website. Once again, I encourage you to learn more about circus history, to consider joining the Circus Historical Society, and we will do this again. But before we sign off, what was it that you guys would say at the end of the show?
Good old Jack Ryan. May all your days be circus days.
And together now, guys.
May all your days be circus days.
Circus days.
Thank you, folks. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you.
Thank you, Chris.
The
The circus is grateful that you love the circus. I'm so glad there's a voice out there speaking on its behalf. Thank you for this program.
Thank you, guys.
See you guys.
Thank
See you
you.
down the road.